Yeah, sure. Thank you. So thank you very much for joining this session. This is our ninth session in this first series of interdisciplinary studies, right? So this last two sessions we talked about regulation. We talked about how the governance, regulatory governance should be to make digital space more public purpose oriented and more participatory and more inclusive, right? That's what we discussed in the last two sessions. So this session we will talk about how these public purpose goals should be achieved in non-regulatory means. So that was more of a regulatory governance, right? So how regulations can be used and how regulatory systems should identify the harms and risks and challenges very early stage and bring all the stakeholders together. That was the previous session's aim, to understand to the larger picture how technology governance can be a better means to govern technology space, right? So that's the last session. Let's now talk about, let me just share the, let me open it up. Yeah. So today's session is framing digital innovation policies to achieve public purpose goals. So how do we frame these policies? So where should we start? So we know how the policy works. Now we understood how the policy cycle works, and then how we frame general innovation policies, and what kind of various political economic frameworks are available, or tools are available for to advance digital innovation, and at the same time to understand risks and to regulate those risks and to regulate overall digital economic space, right? So that is broadly we have seen how it works and how this is moving forward, right? So now let's see how actually there are alternative ways to govern digital policies or a digital society, society and economy. So this is basically the truly interdisciplinary, right? So now we talk about, I will show you in a moment. So we will talk about how different disciplines come together, right, to make sense of the digital space, right? So from the early on, right, from the first session till last session, we have seen different facets of digital economy, how we understand digital economy, society, innovation, and innovation governance. So all this are not just cannot be just understood by one way or one discipline or one lens, right? So you need multiple disciplines or multiple frameworks and different lenses you need to understand each facet of digital economy. So one is, of course, science, technology, society. So that is one discipline now, which is actually combines sociology, anthropology, political science, in a way even economics, all this, even science, science for some, technology and science for some, in some cases, and policy, of course. And policy itself is interdisciplinary, so it will bring policy also together. So all this together makes this so interdisciplinary, right? So from early on, that is what we have been seeing. Some of the concepts we have looked at, like innovation itself, that was political economic concept. So it's steeped into political economy. And the Schumpeter's ideas. Similarly, Mariana Mazzucato's ideas, right? So these ideas are actually entrepreneurial state. So how state should, take the benefit of innovation and redistribute the benefits accrued from the innovation process. So that is again political economy. So it's called heterodox economics, right? So then we move to technology governance. So that is basically science, technology, society. And we also talked about a little bit co-productionist approach. So that is again, how society and science interacts. So how public knowledge of the science is actually understood by different actors. So these all, come together to make, to understand how digital space work, right? So that is why it is truly interdisciplinary, one, and it is also multidisciplinary. Like one is interdisciplinary in the sense more than one interacting, but it is also multidisciplinary in the sense more than two disciplines come together. We have to combine them to make sense of what's happening in digital economy, right? So that is to give you the interdisciplinarity of the subject, right? But more than that, I want to know if you have any questions about anything, because this is a ninth session. This is going to be our last lecture, right? So where I would be talking about the subject. The 10th one is more of discussion between among ourselves. So what we understood from the beginning till now, and also we talk about what are the opportunities basically for us, right? For to study or to pursue career opportunities, and to to do research, or you want to engage with activism, right? Social activism, and become a policy or policy professional, policy practitioner, or you want to become a consultant, or you want to even pursue a professional career in corporate world, where you want to help the corporates to understand public policy, especially digital innovation policy and data economy, and how to make sense, and then what kind of risks they will face if they don't comply with the regulation, right? So all this you can understand, and we will discuss that, right? So we can discuss that in the last session, in the 10th session. 10th session is meant for, I just kept it purposely as a workshop so that we understand all this. And we will also discuss about I think two participants have sent me their assignment, right? So that also we will discuss a little bit about how they have kind of laid out the policy and how they understood, and then how we should understand, or the better way to frame this, right? So India's digital innovation policy from diversity and inclusive perspective, right? So that is what the assignment was. So we will talk about that also in the 10th session. So the 9th session is particularly about, so how do we make digital innovation more public purpose oriented, in the sense how common people, the public, right? So who are participants in the digital economy, who are users of digital platforms, how will they really get control of data, and how they can participate on an equal footing, everybody, right? So they will have equal access, equal opportunities, and equal capacity to decision making, and some kind of empowerment even, right? And ownership, because it is their data at the end of the day which is used by the platforms. So we will see that in this session, right? So this is the last session, last lecture session. This is not last session. Last session will be in the next week, right? So how do we evaluate digital innovation, right? So because we know digital innovation is, we always read about innovation is an amazing thing, right? So it's a wonderful thing to have it, right? So every country wants to be innovative, and every country wants to promote innovation so that they can become a powerhouse, scientific powerhouse, right? So they can become a technology powerhouse, so that they can actually compete in the global markets, right? So that's the idea of digital innovation. If you see any media report or any other reports or any studies, they all point out to this one issue, like digital innovation is a wonderful thing to have, right? So let's see what are these wonderful things, right? So one is usually what is the rhetoric? Rhetoric, when I say rhetoric, means this basically everyday discourse, what we talk about, so the imaginaries, right? So in the public imagination, what it means, having digital innovation capabilities. and what kind of public purpose goals they serve. So there are two sides to it. So first, let's see one side of it. The one side of the public discourse is this. So it creates new economic opportunities. This is what we have been looking at when we saw the literature in the beginning, from Schumpeter to the next different economists and different political scientists, different STS academics. So all point out to this, right? So it provides new economic opportunities in a sense. So it actually, digital innovation will give you a new direction to economy, and it will give new technologies and new tools so that you can create more opportunities. That's the idea. So those opportunities, what are those opportunities? One is entrepreneurship opportunities. The people can become entrepreneurs, innovators, and who invest their money and reap the benefit directly and financially, right? So that is one set of people. The other set is who can gain employment, right, through digital innovation. So when you promote digital innovation, the idea is it brings more employment to the society, into the society, and more work to the society, right? So this work is more, rewarding, in the sense the financial rewards are better. That's what we have seen in some of these cases, right? So the tech, skills, the digital technology skills are now, claiming more premium, right? If you have a better digital technologies, you can be a sought after engineer, software engineer, or a technology engineer, or a technology analyst, or so on. So in a big company, or in a startup, or in a medium-sized company, any company. So that shows us there is a huge need for this kind of skills. So obviously there are a lot of these skills are required. So the many aspirants want to study and then acquire these skills, so that they can gain employment in the digital economy, right? And second is, usually what we hear is about accessibility and freedom of choice. What it means simply, what you could not access easily, the spaces, right? So today you can access easily, right? So one of the examples are like banking. So we have been seeing a lot of developing countries like India. India is also an example. So where banking was not available for large population, right? So large population did not have access to banking services. They did not have accounts. They did not have banking infrastructure where they were living, mostly in the rural India and remote places. And second is socioeconomic conditions keep them away from the banking system. So that with the fintech, which is like more innovative banking system, where you have combined the financial services with technology, underlying technology tools. So you combined these two and then brought a new kind of a services called fintech services, right? So all the banking services, which are possible only with the banking infrastructure, is now possible with fintech companies applications, right? So it is easy to easy to access and easy to transact. So you don't need to go to the bank for every small thing. So you need to just have a mobile phone and then download an app. And even it is without downloading an app, you can also do transactions. You can carry out transactions in mobile with a mobile phone. So this accessibility is one of the main argument, right, for digital innovation promotion. And second is freedom of choice. So you have more choices, right? So now you can, the digital space gives more platforms and more applications, and people can can use these tools to actually to participate in digital economy, which was not possible earlier, or there were difficulties in finding these services, right? So that is one idea. And it is also, when I say choices, it's a freedom to express. So we also talked about it. Somebody's asked, why can't we regulate Facebook? because there is a lot of hate speech in Facebook, Twitter, and all these social platforms. So why can't we regulate? So the argument is, they give a freedom to you, to express, to put your content, what you think is right, self expression, right? So you can freedom for self expression. So as a citizen, as an individual, you have self determination, who can express as a human being, right? So that is possible with all these platforms. So that freedom, a lot of people argue that is one advantage having a digital innovation, right? So, and agility and scale. Agility is nothing but speed. So speed, with the kind of speed what you get the services is not possible otherwise in the physical world, right? So if you have to do a banking transaction, let's say 20 years ago, so what were you doing? We were simply going to a bank, and then we stand in the queue and either withdraw cash from a teller who is a person who sits in the teller. So it's not automatic any that time. So you request, there is a request form, you request for that, and then you withdraw the money. Once you withdraw, then the transaction is recorded on a passbook, like bank passbook you are called, right? So that is this process takes almost few hours to just withdraw cash from a bank, right? So it's your own cash you want to withdraw, which you have deposited in a bank. So it takes hours, which actually takes away your time, effort, and cost. These are involved in this one small transaction, right? Now that is being taken away by technology. So that is another argument, right? Agility. So you can simply sit wherever you are, you just access that service, you carry out the transaction within seconds, right? So that is possible. That is what agility means. So digital innovation provides that agility. And scale. What is scale? Scale is a similar kind of a attribute again, right? So where you are going to the bank, so there's only one bank, and it can only serve only few people within that vicinities or proximity, physical proximity. People can go and then transact in that bank. So if you have to have more people relying on that particular bank in a location, so you need to expand that bank, right? So you need to have more bigger infrastructure, like bigger space, and more people to help you. So all this is required to scale up your services. But in digital world, this is the scale is simply an attribute in itself, right? So it is inherent to the digital platforms. The scaling up is so that is where digital innovation, a lot of people argue this is a big advantage, agility and scale. And of course, competitiveness, we spoke about it. Competitiveness is a country or a state which is a political unit, right? So a political unit wants to compete with another political political unit or geographical unit, geographical political unit, like let's say India competes with China on innovation, and China competes with US. So they compete on who can produce better technology, who can produce better science. So how these technologies and this scientific inventions can help larger section of people, and they can export them and then gain more money, more financial resources. So with these resources, they can distribute that those resources again among their public, right? So there is a argument for competitiveness. Competitiveness is nothing but you have gained an advantage over others by having this technology or innovation or a kind of a tool, right? So by that you are in a more advantageous position than others. So that is called competitive advantage.
पटकन मन आपणच करायची कवापासून
आज आज करे खाले वरे आज करे खाले वरे
Can somebody mute?
डाव्या डोळ्याची मापणी पडे जमिनीतले
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, yeah, let's get back to our slide, right? Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. So competitiveness is nothing but, the competitive advantage over other political unit. Either it could be a state or country or, city. So we compare, on different parameters who are more, innovative or who has more innovative companies, right? So these kind of a comparison. And productivity improvement, right? So this is also one of the biggest argument for adopting digital innovation or having digital innovations, capabilities, right? So so you can become more productive. The productivity means nothing but execution of any task in a minimal given time, right? So you can carry out this task in lesser time than it used to take earlier, the time it used to take earlier, right? So that and it is also effective, right? So it is not just only efficient, but it is also effective in the sense it can do this task even better way, even more useful way, and more friendly, user friendly way. So all this all these attributes it can have. So that is the productivity argument, right? And technology sovereignty, right? So this is a political argument. So once you achieve more technology, your sovereignty is protected, right? Because others will not be able to harm you. You have a technology superiority, so your superior technological prowess can make you better sovereign, govern your own sovereignty better, right? And sustainable development, this is another argument people give you. If you have more digital innovation capabilities, you can actually have first development, but at the same time the development which is more sustainable. How you can do that? So let's say if you have better predictability, right? So using artificial intelligence, you can predict the weather better, you can predict monsoons better, you can predict the waves or the oceans and the meteorological attributes better, right? So how do you do that? Based on the data. So you collect more and more data, and then you see and draw patterns. So how is it possible? You need to have digital infrastructure where you can collect data, and then you need to have a better skills to basically to write better algorithms, and then you have a better systems uh, to make the data sets more quality data sets you can make, and then you can gain better insight into the climate change, right? So that is basically sustainable development argument, right? So this is another argument. And then a lot of people also argue that it's like your waste management, your water management. Effectively you can do water management in both agriculture and otherwise industrial water management and all that. So because you have you know how to bring efficiency by using different technologies like IoT, Internet of Things, right? So where you can plant sensors in let's say in a field, agriculture field, and capture the data and see how your what kind of soil needs how much water, and then based on that data you keep improving your efficiency, right? So that is one argument. So this is all clubbed into sustainable development argument. So technology innovation, or rather digital innovation, brings more sustainable development, right? So these all are some of the arguments for having digital innovation. and this digital innovation can, serve the public purpose goals. So there is an argument here. There is a positive argument. There are, a lot of examples. You have case studies which will show you these all are possible, right? It's not that they are not possible, but the challenge comes when all these things are, they also have the other facet, right? So the other side to it, the flip side or the downside, right? So one is controlling data. Who controls the data now? So now the data is central to all these innovations and all these arguments. So who controls the data? That becomes a big question, right? So the control should be with government, our control should be with the private enterprises, our control should be with the people, public. How we govern, right? So who should make the rules? So how do you make the rules for these digital innovations? And whether scalability at a large, for a large population, you scale up one company scaling up for the large population or consumer base. Is it good for society? Like Amazon has, expansive empire, right? So it's a behemoth. So it's a big technology company which has presence everywhere in the world, and they have data, about every customer, and they have products, they have partners everywhere. So they are becoming almost a monopoly in e-commerce. So is it good to have that kind of scale? Because with the speed, because they execute with speed. So that's not a bad thing, to see that. But having this, the capabilities and the power control over the data and over the, political economy just by one entity, right? So all the power is rested with one entity. Is it good for democracy, good for, political participation or economic participation? Does it create equal opportunities for everyone? So these questions arise when you talk about now the other side of these arguments, right? So now let's see what are the other side of the arguments. Why, digital innovation also creates. So there are other problems or challenges for our society, right? So we have already seen this, but I am just giving a context for, our today's topic. So we need to slowly transition into that, right? So that's why we want to revisit this. We will revisit all this once more and then transition into the topic, how we, what kind of governance we require, So we saw how the process we saw, but we still we have not seen in the last, say, 8 sessions, we have not yet seen what actually it requires to to come to that process, right? So because last session was all about the process, governance process, but now this is more of a political economic argument, right? So that is what I was talking about. So what we saw last time was more of a STS, science, technology and society, point of view. But now we are looking at these issues from a political economic, standpoint, right? So the first is, of course, monopolization. This is what I was talking about. So let's say if all the data is controlled by one entity, we saw that why it happens in digital world. That is because simply network effects, we discussed this also, in our early sessions, we discussed about network effects. So how these network effects, make digital platforms, bring more and more customers, and then more data gives more insights, and the more insights gives better strategy to acquire more customers. So it's a cycle, right? So because of this, process, what happens is, digital economy creates monopolies. One is market monopolies, and second is data monopolies. So both they have a huge market share, and they also have large amounts of data with them. So this data is actually doesn't belong to them, right? So they have collected this from the citizens or from users who are like you and me. So once they collect this, now, they know who you are, they know what you want, and what your aspirations are, how you behave on online space, and what kind of transactions you make, where you make. So all this gives them the best insight, right? And it is not about just one person they know. If they have only one person's data, or this one person is one record which cannot be clubbed with others, it doesn't make it doesn't add value to the platform. How the platform gets value is when this data is aggregated in the sense they all sum up, right? So this data is coming together, like you, me, like people like you and me. There are millions of records they can actually bring together and make this data a sense, right? So like insight from this data. So how many people, like in this millions of like 10 million people, so let's say 200,000, in the sense 2 lakhs, right? So if they have like 2 crore customers across the globe, so 5 lakh people are actually looking at this product in this way, right? So that is the insight. So then they know how to push that product to whom, right? Which geography, which customer. This used to take months and years for companies earlier to get this insight from the market, because you have to carry out a market research study. You go to the market and then you bring data, and then but that data is again it's not huge, right? So you can only bring samples. In the sense, if your consumer base is like 1 million people are buying your products, so you can only touch few thousands, right? So maximum, if it is a big company, you can only touch few thousands, right? And then that insight is only coming from few thousands, not millions. And based on that thousand, you extrapolate the data and make insight saying that, okay, if in Hyderabad, in this particular market, this product is actually sold in this season, for this reason, right? But that insight is coming from only few thousand, which means actually it may not be representative. But today it's not that, right? So you have data sitting in one office. There are people who can write algorithms and then make all kinds of intersections of these data insights, all kinds of graphs it can make. This is all possible because of this innovation, digital innovation technologies. So that is what I want to make this point here, how monopolization is a problem, right? And of course, there is a problem of surveillance capitalism, where the companies violate privacy of people while they collect data, and by collecting data, they gain power. So that is called surveillance capitalism. And underemployment, this is an interesting topic, right? So somebody asked in the last session about how do we tackle this problem. Only few people can get jobs and high paid jobs, and few people can become really millionaires in digital economy, but large sections of people cannot get those jobs because digital economy don't require huge number of jobs at the top, right? So you only need few people to write algorithms. You only need few managers to manage your data and your people, and you don't need many people to actually once the processes are automated, right? So this has been going on forever, right? So we have been looking at different industrial revolutions, right? From agriculture to mechanization to automation to industrialization to automation to now digitalization, right? So all these transitions are transformations in the society, in the economy. So each phase, each era, right? So once the agriculture is mechanized and we have started using tools, then you require less and less number of people. And once the scale has become industrialized, in the sense you don't use small number of people working in cottage industries or small retail establishments, but huge factories, right? So the the electromechanic, kind of technology, which is made possible with electricity and, and other innovations that has been possible. And from then onwards, we needed even less people. But the interesting thing is, what was happening is those jobs were actually creating other jobs, right? So different kinds of jobs. So the capital is, once capital is deployed in one sector or one, factories or one kind of industry, and the returns were redeployed in other places. But, that redeployment, is decreasing. We talked about this last time also, about what Thomas Piketty talked about, the rate of the growth of return on capital. So in the sense, if you have invested your capital in an activity, the return on that activity, especially in the new economy, right, digital economy, so that growth of that return, right, so which grows from year on year, is very high compared to the capital which is deployed in the real economy, underlying economy. In the sense, you don't deploy the capital, but the real economy is like more of a economy which is more of informal or more of a physical economy, where people do work hard, and they get salary and they consume goods, and then that economy is not growing at the pace the capital is deployed, right, by the rich people, right? So if you see the valuations of any of these digital corporations, you understand, right, the startups. So once the money is coming in through venture capital funding, then this money is multiplied, right? The financial resources are multiplied. The returns are huge, in a few years' time. So if somebody is investing today 10 million, in 5 years, that has become $1 billion, right? So, but that is not true in the real economy, the underlying economy, where a person works hard and his salary wouldn't go, or his wages wouldn't go, in the similar fashion in 5 years, right? So what does it say? It says it is creating, digital economy is creating an equal distribution of wealth, an equal distribution of resources, right? So that creates underemployment. What is underemployment? Like, let's say automated or digital corporations like Uber, or or Ola, or even Zomato, Swiggy. These are platforms, right? So what they do is they employ very small number of people in high skilled activities, where the activities require high skills, high digital skills, like programmers, like like data scientists, like AI technologists, like cloud administrators and managers. So all these corporate functions require higher skills. Those skills are very the requirement of those skills are very small in number. If you see the big corporations like IBM, right? So IBM used to have 4 lakh 5 lakh people in their payroll just few years ago, but now they have only I think they have just only 1 lakh or 2 lakhs now, 1.5 lakh, 2 lakhs people. That means 50% of their workforce has been cut down. So similarly, in many of these companies, digital companies, the skills required is going down, but the salaries are going up for the higher skills, right? So the higher skills, command more salaries, but the skills which are required to perform the job are diminishing. In the sense, they are decreasing, right? So what kind of skills now they are looking for to to increase their wealth? When they say, they always talk about wealth creation. So to create wealth for whom? That is the question we have to ask, right? So it is the wealth creation for not for everyone, because when Uber driver earns, So and then the person who is sitting in the technology department of Uber, so they both don't earn same money, and similarly their skills are different, and this person acquires skills. To acquire the same skills, it costs more. So this creates this underemployment, in the sense the skills you cannot require, the required skills you cannot acquire, and you can't get the employment where you can survive with the money what you get, right? This wages what you gain, with that you barely survive in the society. You cannot really become a comfortable human being with dignity. You can buy or consume things which actually keep you or make you healthy person, and with dignity, right? So that is what is human life is all about. You need health, you need to live healthy life, and you need to live dignified life, right? So these are the two fundamental um, requirements for any human life. So if you want to do these, if you want to lead such life, then obviously you cannot have underemployment in your society. So you need to have a decent wages, so that people can live healthily and with dignity, right? So that's the argument against, when people talk about employment generation. Yes, certainly there is employment generation, but there is also other side to it, right? So similarly, worker rights. So it is again, linked to this underemployment. So when you don't have, full time, if you don't give a full time permanent jobs, so because there are no more, similar kind of jobs available today, which are, full time and permanent. They are all, contractors, or their partners where you earn as per your work hours, and it puts the worker in a precarious situation. In the sense, it creates risks for the employee. He or she can be thrown away from the job at any point in time. One, there is no safety net for your employment. First, second, you are not protected through social safety net like insurance. Like, once you retire, once the person don't have good health, then what they do, they have to they have to rely on debts, right? Or they have to rely on government facilities. They cannot have the company provided insurance. But that's not true. The employees who are employed with better skills, right? So the higher skills. So these worker rights, and similarly the monitoring and surveillance of an employee. Employees are surveilled, put under surveillance and monitoring for 24/7. So their work hours increase. They are told, you will get incentive once you clock 10 hours. Every hour is matters to you if you deliver certain goods to this particular address, right? So that's what happens in Swiggy. That's why they have to even they brave the worst traffics and worst dangerous roads, right? So there are so many accidents, people these kind of unfortunate incident happen. So these worker rights are not protected when you are thinking about digital. There is someone. Somebody has unmuted. Let me just. Yeah. Okay. So this underemployment and worker rights are linked, right, in digital economy. And the fourth one is obviously the algorithmic opacity. What is opacity? Algorithmic opacity is where you cannot figure out what is happening behind the system, right? So if there is a change, or the design is such that it can take your data without your own knowledge, and similarly it can change the way it functions, the system functions without your knowledge. You cannot see how inner mechanics work, right? That is called algorithmic opacity. In the sense, you don't have transparency, right? So the transparency is paramount for harmless digital space, right? So when you know what's happening with your data, with yourself, when you are interacting in digital space, then only you can actually interact, or you can transact in the digital space with safety, with the safety nets, and your privacy and your data is safeguarded, right? So, and consumer protection, which is again, it's interrelated with all these things. So where these digital platforms, sometimes don't think about consumer protection, right? So they violate them. So this we talked about in the last sessions also. And big tech capture of governance, right? So this is very important thing. This is an interesting thing, where the big tech companies, they become, because of their the innovation capabilities, right? The kind of technology they bring. So governments don't have such capabilities. Then governments rely on big tech, right? The big tech companies for technology. So once the capacity, government capacity, and the government's capabilities in digital innovation and digital technologies is limited, then they rely on the technology companies, which are outside actors for the governments, who have their own interest, right? They don't have same interest of government. Governments are answerable. They are responsible. They are accountable for their people, right? So they are either elected, or they are custodians of the governance of the whole governance system of the sovereign state, right? So this now, if you don't have capacity to actually execute certain functions because of limited technology capabilities you have as a government, then you rely on the big tech companies. Then big tech companies design the way it is advantageous for them. They will advise government to have certain kinds of technologies which are actually detrimental for the public interest, public purpose, right? So it doesn't serve the public purpose. So big tech capture of governance is a very important, negative, challenge what we have today in all countries, not just in one, but every country, developing countries, it doesn't matter, So all global south, global north, you take any of the Asia, Europe, Africa, North America, it doesn't matter. So every government is now captured by the big tech, influence. And of course, this distortion of political communication. What does it mean? It means the last session, somebody asked the same question as I just mentioned it. It's like how hate speech, how disinformation, misinformation is passed on in different social platforms, right? This will create rifts in society, and this also creates some kind of accessibility issues, because some people are threatened, so they can't access. They are scared to access these spaces, right? So and the political communication also is manipulated using these technologies and tools and the data. So all this can happen on the digital space, right? So this is the arguments for against digital innovation. It is not that digital innovation is bad inherently. It's not. Digital innovation is not a value laden, right? So on its own it is not bad, but when it is used for certain purposes, who is in control, right? So that is what matters. So how we are laying out our laid out our rules, right, to govern these digital systems. So if you have better governance systems, if you have more participatory approaches, if you have more, so all these things can actually give you a better digital space. But since we don't have them, so that's why we don't have this, we have these challenges now, right? So now let's see, how we kind of, we have certain frameworks and certain approaches, to make this better, right? Digital innovation and digital technology space make this better, right? So we saw, how in the last session, one approach is digital governance, like anticipatory, inclusive, and value-based. That's what we saw. Value-based is nothing but directionality. So we saw that, we anticipate the risks, and we anticipate how this will work. And then we also make it more inclusive by making more people participate in the policy making, so that, it's like the regulations are better and the policy making is better. and this also gives the value to the intended value to the public, right? So who is using these technologies. So that is the digital technology governance approach, right? So that's what we saw in the last session. And the second is decentralization, which is like local regional innovation governance. So this we didn't touch much upon it, right? So we had only once, I think, in the 5th or 6th geographies of innovation, I think that in that session we mentioned briefly about regional innovation. So innovation is also in it happens in a geographical location, right? So it is a contextual also, and it is also like, we talked about scaling, right? So if you scale up, so you become there is a high potential that the big tech companies can become monopolies, right? So the problems associated with that is are going to challenge the both political systems and the social cohesion and all that, right? So now regional approach is one alternative for this kind of innovation. Like, you don't have to have national innovation governance policy, right? So you can also have at a state level or at a district level, at a city level. So you can have policies at a state level so that you know what exactly is happening, right? So the more closer to the location, the more closer to the context, what kind of people require what kind of technologies, so what kind of things we need to address. So the more near to the users the innovation policies and the innovations happen, so the better understanding and the better control you can have, right? So and it can also be less risky, right? So that is one approach you can take. Regional smart specialization. Smart specialization is nothing but where if you were let's say a city like Mumbai or Pune. So Mumbai has been a financial center, right? So the financial capital of India or financial hub of India. So Mumbai has certain advantages, right? So where there is already talent, available talent is is fit to for certain innovations, to develop certain innovation capabilities, and the kind of innovation ecosystem there exists already, like research institutes and the and universities and the corporates already and the government interventions. So all these things come together, and the infrastructure, right? So which is very important: health, education, physical infrastructure. So all this makes certain spaces more specialized. Innovations can be developed in certain spaces, right? So certain spaces don't have these advantages, then you can develop other kinds of innovations, right? So like, let's say Mumbai, Pune can have a different kind of innovations, but Nagpur, Aurangabad can have a different kinds of innovation specializations, right? So the different industries, different data sets, you can have different kind of policy you can have there. So you make a regional policy so that these smart specializations you can understand better, and then you can improve your innovation there. So that is one approach. And of course the third one is mission oriented innovation, which we spoke about in our I think 6th or 5th sessions. So which is basically what is the purpose, and then you have a grand societal challenge, and then that challenge you break it down into smaller pieces, and then those challenges you target, and then you have a big mission, right? So let's say you have a health mission, right? India's digital health mission. So what is health mission's objective is? So you have a clearly defined objective what you want to do, right? So with the data, so with the digital with the innovation, right? So that kind of a policy you build, and then it's like you have a long-term view, because it's a mission oriented is nothing but long-term. It's in and in the interest of larger ecosystem and larger public interest. And it can also have multiple actors, multiple sectors, and private public both come together, and then have and develop the research development capabilities and invention capabilities and other capabilities which are required for innovation, right? So that is, that will have a spillover effects. It's like, like let's say NASA was launching into in satellite into moon, right? So when it was launching, it required a lot of different kinds of technologies, right? So it's not just only we talk about rocket science. Rocket science is not just one thing, right? So it requires engineering capabilities. It requires computer science capabilities. It requires even healthcare, because people you put into the space, you need to monitor what's happening to them, right? So that is also possible. And communication, right? So the communication technology. So a lot of spillover effects. Because of this mission, you have developed a lot of capabilities within this mission, right? So those capabilities you can use in a different setting, right? So this communication technology was later used in to develop cellular mobile or cordless technology, without wireless technology, right? Similarly, the kind of engineer computer science, right? So you need a better computing power, so that can be used later in healthcare, in education, right? So those this spillover effects always help us in mission oriented innovation, right? So and this also we spoke about. We need to have always rule based, responsible, ethical innovation governance, in the sense, so without rules it becomes wild west. So everybody it's just for anybody, right? Anybody can grab the pie, the take the bite the cake and then leave, and nobody actually is responsibly managing their affairs, or responsibly behaving where they abide by the rules, right? So that is where regulations come into play. That's what we saw in the last two sessions, right? So where the regulations are basically having economic, rational, social imperatives, so that it's like they are serving the public purpose, right? So that is why you need to have responsible ethical innovation frameworks, huh? And so that is the last one. This is what we are going to talk about. So this transition, what I was talking about right earlier. So we talk about first why, how do we evaluate this whole digital innovation, and what is required to basically govern this better, right? So one is process, and second is, so how is in a way process, but what it takes, right? So the overarching framework. So that is what governing platforms through commons, right? So what is commons now? So commons is nothing but people who are not just only because of their affinity to the family or relationship, but otherwise a common interest, right? So, or in a geographical location, but it started with first geographical location, right? But digital space is different. But in a physical space, it started with a geographical location. Sorry. So the people who are living in a certain geographical location, they basically come together, who are people, right? They are not entities who has power, right? Who are like powerful agents in society or in governance systems, like let's say government actors, or private entities like companies or NGOs. No, they are not entities. They are people, right? The people who come together to manage their own affairs, right? So with a small intervention with a public sector or government, right? Government intervention will be small, very little, but they organize themselves as collective. Like we spoke about this also in earlier sessions, right? So the collectives make better public purpose, to achieve public purpose goals. They make better sense, right? So the commons and collective governance and collective ownership, right? So all these things, if you put together, we were talking about this, right? So how they are basically multidisciplinary, these things, because I want you to understand this so that, when you analyze, when you become a policy maker or policy analyst, policy consultant, in digital innovation, then you should be able to combine different approaches to give, the best policy solution, right? So those disciplines are, should be interrelated, and you should be able to sense that which discipline, which framework you should pick up so that you can give a better solution, right? So that is very important. So that's why I kind of, see, these all can be clubbed into governing digital innovation, right? So within that governance, these all are different approaches which belongs to different disciplines, right? So if you take technology governance, it is public policy plus science, technologies, society. And second, decentralizing regional innovation, smart specialization. This is again, STS, public policy plus economics, right? Mission-oriented innovation, political economy, and rule-based, responsible, ethical innovation governance. This is basically philosophy, STS, science, technology, social studies, and political science, right? So this is one. And then sociology, of course, sociology. And last one, governing platforms through commons. This is again, sociology and political economy. So all this together, makes one governance, digital innovation governance, right? So that is multidisciplinary in approach, and we combine different frameworks here, and it should fit to the purpose, in the sense, what is your goal, as a policy maker? What is that you want to achieve? Do you want to study and analyze? Then what actually you require to analyze, what kind of frameworks you require, what kind of lens you should look at, right? Whether it is STS, science, technology, society, or political economy approach. So that, context, right? So which context? Whether it is you are talking about a regional innovation, or you are talking about, particularly platforms in shared economy, then you need only political economy. The governing platforms through commons approach is enough. But if you need to understand much better sector, a bigger sector like fintech sector, then you can actually combine 2-3, political economies. Of course, very important, because fintech is all about financial resources and macroeconomics, microeconomics. So a lot of things are involved in that, right? So that's why you require different kinds of approaches, combining them and then looking at them, right? So that is what this slide is about, right? So that you understand, as an aspiring policy maker or policy consultant analyst, you should be able to understand how to pick right approaches, right frameworks, and right disciplines, and combine them to study, to analyze, to formulate, right? So this is what you should be able to understand, right? And next, so now we come to what is governance by commons. So we talked about commons, right? So what is commons? Basically, commons is nothing but the people, right? So the people who are living in one particular space, who are sharing the resources, right? Common resources they share. They share the land, they share water, same pipeline, same lake, same well, and similar kind of road, same road, and same they all have inhale same air, so they all live in same ecological environment. So this basically, that is commons, right? So the commons is nothing but who has a shared interest and shared resources, right? Who actually share resources, and who has shared interest because they live in the shared space. So that is what we call commons, right? So before we go into the commons governance, let's talk about one important economic concept, right? Tragedy of commons. So if you understand, or I don't know whether you guys have are from rural background, if you would have gone to villages, right? So there is always a grassland, right? So the grassland or mountain. The shepherds and the people who rear, animals and the basically the animal husbandry, right? The who are engaged with that, they take their, uh, they take their cows or sheep, the grasslands, which are common, right? They are not owned by anybody, right? They are just common land. So everybody goes there and they basically make them eat the grass and then bring them back. And then there is a lake, which is again commons, which is a commonly shared. So you go there, you draw the water, or make your cattle drink the water and bring them back, right? So who manages this, right? So who manages? The village together manages, or a community together manages. They are the ones who are responsible for it, and they know how to manage. They have certain rules for it, and they also have certain, understanding how to. Similarly, there are associations, right? So like, let's say, parks built and managed by the associations, a resident welfare associations in a locality. So they are commons again, right? Playgrounds. So they are commons, right? There is a argument that these common spaces can be governed by collectives in the sense people who are coming together because they share the resources, they share the space, and they also share the interest, because there is an interest, right? Commercial interest or economic interest is there, right? When they derive value from that space. So because of that, they govern better, right? That is the one argument. But the argument alternate to the, so that is basically tragedy of commons. So an alternate to the concept of tragedy of commons is commons governance. So the governance by commons is actually antithetical or opposite to the tragedy of commons. So tragedy of commons concept is actually developed by William Foster Lloyd, who was a British political scientist in 1833, very long ago, right? So what he conceptualized is, he wrote a small paper or something. So on the grassland, so grazing, right? So the cattle graze on the grasslands. So he says the overuse and then not maintaining it properly because the resource is limited and nobody is governing it. There is no authority. So it is actually commons. So they don't maintain and they exhaust the resources. In the sense, they basically don't take care of it. And they also exhaust the resource in the sense they every day they take them, and the grass, when the grass is over, then nobody actually cares to put back the grass, right? So that is his argument. So it becomes a tragedy, to have a commons. So tragedy, that is called tragedy of commons, in the sense the commons is basically a public good. So that is actually alternately we also call in policy, policy terms, it's called public good, right? The government circles or the policy circles, it's called public good. What is public good? Public good, there is a very definitive, there is a definition, right? So public good is basically in economics, it is defined as non-excludable and non-rivalrous resource. What is non-excludable, non-rivalrous? So this is economic concept. Right? You need to be a little bit careful when you understand this. So if you don't understand, please tell me where you don't understand. Then I will explain you better, right? So non-rivalrous is the goods that don't diminish, or it is actually, it doesn't dwindle, right? Even if you use, the supply is always there, right? Like sunlight, like oceans, right? Water, like clean air, like, so these things, right? These things, they don't basically dwindle, right? They don't diminish. They are there every day and they are for everybody's use, right? That's public good, basically. And this is actually this is the concept in economics, right? So this is again, I'm talking about the neoliberal economics. And non-excludability. What is non-excludability? Non-excludability is nothing but the goods available for all citizens, right? So they are unlimited in a way, you can use them the way you want, and they are also available to everyone. In the sense, you don't have to exclude one to actually, to keep one, right? So like, let's say a stadium, it has only capacity of certain capacity, right? So it doesn't have more than 50,000. Let's say 50,000 is the capacity. That is the capacity. So if 50,000 one person has to come in, the obviously you have to exclude one to replace one. So that is excludability, right? But let's say non-excludability. If there is a firecrackers in your city, right? So there is whole city is bursting crackers, and then the firecrackers which are going up, right, in the sky, and everybody can see, right? So unless you don't have a vision for that, that's a different issue. There's a long view, and then you don't have. But if you want to see, if you can see, you can see. Nobody will exclude you because there is no space constraint. You get onto your building, and then you can see that, right? So that is called non-excludability. And non-rivalrous also. It's actually because once you cracker is up, and then it gives you that entertainment, right? So it entertains you by bursting up in the sky. So you can view that. It won't, the resource won't go. If 10 people come and then view it, that resource will not exhaust. So all the 10 people can view at once, right? So that is basically public good, right? So the idea of tragedy of commons is you cannot have free resource. That is the idea, because neoliberal economics, what it does is it actually, puts price on everything, right? So without price, you cannot give anything free. If you give free, then there is a free rider problem, right? Free rider problem is nothing but people don't want to pay, so they don't want to maintain. They don't, value it. That is called free rider problem. So the governing such, common resource becomes a problem, becomes a challenge. You cannot maintain, you cannot govern, you cannot manage, and you cannot derive value after some time. That is the economic idea of tragedy of commons. But the alternate argument is different. What is it? People, they mutually respect each other's interest, right? In a community, right? So if your interest is served by others interest you also try to serve. So there is a mutual reciprocity in a community, right? And people are ready to give when they take from others, right? That is a community concept, right? It's a commons. That is where the commons concept as a commons, right? So the governed by commons governance, right? So that concept emerges from this, right? So let's say, so if you have any doubt, let me know. If you don't understand, because this is very important. This is, not here throughout your life. These all are important because these all are very fundamental economic concepts, right? So if you guys don't understand now, let me just let me pause and then give you more. No, you don't have. If you guys don't have any question, then we'll move on, right? Okay. So let's move on to the next slide. Then we will see. Yeah. So next slide we will move and then see how we can progress. Yeah. So the idea, what I was alluding to. So this is basically a similar idea, right? So this is the idea what I was talking about. So Elinor Ostrom, who was a Nobel laureate, right? So for her work governing commons, common pooled resources framework, right? So that is the framework she has developed to basically to counter this, this argument, this concept of tragedy of commons, right? So she showed there is an institutional process where you can have, certain rules-based institutions you can develop, and then those institutions can come together and then, govern themselves as in a effective way as commons, right? So as a collective. So that is her idea. So for developing that idea, she was also awarded Nobel Prize, right? Nobel Prize. So so she kind of, she wrote this book, Governing Commons. So you have this, Governing the Commons, right? So I have given the source. So this is one thing. So you go through the source when I give this presentation. So everywhere I have mentioned the source, right? The last class also I have talked about this. So you go to the source and then see if you can access those material. If you can't access, let me know, or you can actually access the summary of it. If it is not full book or full article, you can get the summary of it, or you can get an idea of the main theme, what they are saying. So like, let's say Elinor Ostrom's Governing Commons. So you can understand that, if you go to even Wikipedia has a better, layout, but you can actually read a lot of articles online. There are online. If you think, you are not able to access, let me know, mail me. I will send some articles and some kind of a material where you can understand this subject, right? So, but this is the source, right? Source, I give source in the down, so that you guys can understand where it is coming from, and then you can go and check back, right? So what actually they are talking about, right? So she talked about rules for collective action in a cooperative group, in the sense, so they are not very different from cooperative, right? So the cooperative setup, like cooperation is nothing but people cooperate with each other, right? And they come together for one purpose, right? One common purpose. So that is the idea. So this collective action, that is what makes it, and it should be rule based. There should be rules, and there is a collective action, and they have to cooperate with each other. So these are the fundamental, principles for any, governance of commons framework. These are fundamental principles, right? And she developed 8 design principles for this common pool resource, institution. So how common pool resources you pool together as commons, as public, as collective, come together, and you build the institution, and then you govern yourself. You develop your own strategies. You develop your own authoritative structures, right? So for that, she kind of designed 8 principles, right? So 8 design principles. One is clearly defined, contents. So basically, you need to have what actually you are trying to do here. What kind of the objective, right? So what is that you are, what kind of resources you want, what kind of resources you are trying to build, actually you are developing, you are serving, the purpose. That is what is very important, but should be clearly defined, right? So, and then what should be, excluded, in the sense, who are these people who can come together? So because, this is not including everyone, right? It's not possible in a physical space. But we will talk about the digital space. This is basically, she developed these principles for the physical space, in the sense, normal, common resources like land, water usage, right? So this is not for digital space. So we will talk about digital application, how this applies to the digital space. We will talk about this next, because there are a lot of economists, political scientists have taken these principles and they have applied to the digital space. And now this is a popular, framework, emerging in the digital, to govern digital space and to govern digital innovation, right? And second is appropriation and provision of common resources, in the sense, who are these people who are beneficiaries, who are users, and who are developing these resources, all these together, right? They are the appropriators, basically. Appropriation, provision. So how do you provision them? How do you distribute them? And that are adapted into the local condition, in the sense, where you live in the same space, the locality, you basically you do this appropriation, you develop, you use these resources in the same locality. Again, you have to remember, this is physical space. This is a land, water, um, spaces like playground. So these all are the things she's talking about. She's not talking about digital space. So collective choice agreements, right? So the collective choices is there should be arrangements where people should have choices. This is not a dictatorial, right? So you define this is what is required. No, there should be choices so that these appropriators participate, the users and the developers who develop these resources, who use these resources. In this conception, they both are same. That's why they are called appropriators, right? So they participate in decision making. So they decide based on the choices available. So how do you know the based on choices? There are choices. So everybody come together. So they discuss what kind of choices they have as an individual, as collective, and then they participate in the decision making. In the sense, it is not just only you develop the resource, you distribute and you use them, but you also participate in decision making. That is what makes this is more appealing for governance, right? And effective monitoring by monitors who are part of the accountable to the appropriators. And again, see this. So if you don't monitor, the monitoring is very important, because if you don't have any monitoring monetary authority, right? So then what happens is similar, tragedy of commons. That is possible actually. So to avoid that, what you need to have is people who are users, who are developers, they should monitor the process, right? The governance of this commons or space or resources, or they are actually accountable to those users, and so they cannot be like outside, like they are not authoritative, right? So who has authority, power, but they are not accountable? No, it is actually the other way around. They have to be accountable to the users. Unlike the companies where they produce the goods, and once you receive that, once you buy that, their accountability stops there. Only they have an agreement where if they want to, if the agreement says they can service you after sales, then they come and service you. Otherwise, there is nothing, right? So once you buy, you buy. There is only an agreement, bargaining agreement, where if the goods is non-usable condition, then you bring back, we will give the money. That's a different issue. But here, but they don't have accountability to you. You can't ask them, it's like, why you made this product. You can't ask them. But here you can question that, why you made this product, right? So that, that kind of a monitoring is why you use this resource, particular resource, why you are deploying. So these kind of things you can, why certain people are given certain kind of roles. All these questions you can pose to these appropriators basically, right? So as an appropriator. And a scale of graduated sanctions for resource appropriators who violate the rules, right? See, first you define, you have a rule base, and you have arrangements, the choices, collective choice arrangements. You also have monitoring, body or monitoring agencies or monitoring people, individuals. And then you also have some sanctions, some kind of a action you take people who violate rules, right? So otherwise people keep violating rules, right? So because it's they think they are also owners, everybody is a owner now. So everybody is a owner, everybody has authority. So everybody can, there are people, they are always deviants, right? In every process. So they want to go above the rules. So to avoid that, you have a sanctions, right? So if you do this, then the action is you will be removed from this process for certain days, certain months. So those kind of rules, sanctions, right? So you need to have. And mechanisms of conflict resolution. So the conflict resolution mechanism, which is cheaper, which is easy to access, in the sense alternate dispute resolution, where you don't have to go to the court. So the people who are accountable, who are appropriators, you can have your own, a group which is like, complaint redressal or dispute resolution body, so where there are people who are based on their experience or based on their expertise. So you can have few people sitting on that board, and then they can actually resolve your disputes and conflicts, right? So those kind of mechanisms you should have, so that you can avoid very costly disputes running in the courts, right? Courts, the formal courts. And self-determination of the community recognized by higher level of authorities. So now, so you have self-determination because you have agency. You are, as an individual, you have, you can, you not only use the resource, but you also have, some authority, some empowerment, to organize and to basically to have some authority, right? And in case of longer common pool resources, so larger common pool organizations in the form of multiple layers of nested enterprise and smaller. So what does this mean? So this is basically, if you are building a huge resource pool, like let's say you are managing not just one lake or one playground, but you have the whole city you are managing. There is one big township you are managing, and then within that you have spaces like common spaces like playgrounds, you have water bodies, you have all those. So then you have one overarching, the bigger organizing enterprise, where the layers, you can have different layers. One layer who is managing governing the lakes, one is managing the playgrounds, like that, right? So that is the different layers and nested enterprise, which is like, again, network, it's networked. So that is these are the 8 principles she proposed for governing the commons, right? So this, we will see now how we can actually apply this in the digital space, right? So what is the rationale? Like, let's say data and digital resources resemble public goods. So data is actually owned by whom? So this is the big question, last people were talking about last 10 years. This is one of the biggest policy discourse point, right? In digital space, who owns the data, right? So because data is such a valuable thing in digital economy, so who owns that? So the argument is to apply, what Elinor Ostrom's governing commons, apply that to the digital space. When you apply to the digital space, so you see that data and digital resources, even infrastructure, they are not, they are not somebody's property. They are actually collected from the public. So obviously they are public good. So which are basically non-rival, non-excludable. So the data is never exhausting, right? Data is ever produced. It's not exhausted. You cannot just have data is diminishing. Tomorrow, data stops, data stop being produced, right? That is not going to happen soon. And similarly, there is no, replacement. If you replace one data, you have to take out somebody's data. It's not that, right? So the more and more space we have, the more and more, because of the capabilities we have built. So this resembles public good, where non-rival, it is non-excludable, right? And the problem is, when it is public good, why, the market players like big tech companies or the private enterprises, why they are actually trying to show you that this is a scarce resource and you need to have a market, principles, or you can't treat this as a public good, but treat it as a scarce resource, which is excludable and which has rival, so that, it becomes a commercially viable, where only few people can control the data, right? That is the rationale. Like this artificially constructed, this imaginary, this digital resource or data is actually a scarce, resource. It's very valuable and it is very scarce. So that, it's like you cannot have a public good kind of a commons governance is not possible for this. That is the argument, they have brought into the fore, right? And data resources in control of private corporations will enable exploitative and unsustainable economic order. So we saw that. So what happens when data resources are controlled by very few players who are who are, commercially oriented, or who has a large commercial interest, right? So they become billionaires, and all others become, minions. We all, don't have any of authority, any empowerment, or we can't participate in that economy. We cannot reap the benefit. We should be able to do it, right? So the workers will lose, the users will lose, and the only winner would be who owns the platform, right? So that is what is happening. So skewed political economy of digital development. So what happens is, because of this, only small sections of people are, controlling this. So the large sections of, socio-income groups who are in the lower rung of the society are going to be excluded from this process, one. And second is, they will be at a disadvantage because they will not have any empowerment. They can't have any decision making. They can't even say, what kind of policy they need in a digital world, how they can't determine what actually benefits them. So somebody will tell them now what benefits you. I know better, so you should either take it or leave it, right? So that is what happens in a skewed political economy, where people won't have any empowerment or any rights, right? So, and this forestalls economic prospects, right? So this kind of a framework basically puts everybody into a disadvantageous position, and it actually stalls their economic prosperity, economic prospect, especially the smaller businesses, who don't have these resources, the digital resources, and who are, communities who use the data, whose data is being used by the platforms, but they are actually excluded from all the governance mechanism, like decision making. So what you are going to do with the data, we never know, right? So is there a way we can give, Amazon or Facebook our opinion, how you can you show your algorithm, right? So how it actually takes over my data and what it does, can you show me? So this kind of questions we cannot ask, right? So it is not possible, because the one guy sits on the top and then he makes all the decisions, Mr. Zuckerberg, right? So who sits in Silicon Valley and makes all the decisions, and then we just simply abide by it. There is no process where we can enter. But if you see this rules don't apply there, right? So you have to have accountability, you have to come as a collective, and everybody is empowered in this framework. So in digital world today, what we are seeing, we don't have any any empowerment or any power to do that. But in a governance, by commons, or governing the commons, if a digital space is governed by commons, like so how the shepherd goes, and then 10 shepherds share the same, cattle rearer shares the same mountain, or same grazing land, so how they share it and they manage it effectively, and they they look for each other's interest. Similarly, we can also have a digital space, where the commons, right, or let's say the workers, like Uber, all the drivers come together, having their own app, or they are sitting on a board of, representatives of sitting on board of, Uber. Like, let's say the Bangalore Uber drivers will have a say in how Uber should run in Bangalore, right? So you have a representatives, 5 or 10 representatives sitting on the board in Bangalore. So that regional, innovation center, where Uber has a regional governance center, where these drivers sit on the board and then they make the decisions, along with the Uber management. So this is possible if it is governed by the commons, right? So how the street should be less congested, because Uber creates more congestion now. So the otherwise the argument was, when Uber was coming into the market, it it removes the congestion from the cities, big cities, because it has a shared economy approach. Shared economy, what is shared economy? Shared economy is, so the commercial purposes, the users and the service provider come together on a platform, and then they share the resources and then we pay for it, right? So Uber is one. Uber is very apt example for that, and Airbnb is one example, and Ola is another example. So these kind of shared economy, this is the promise they made, when they came into the market. Cities will be less congested, cities will be more sustainable and less pollution. So all these things, it's like, and they said better pay for drivers. So these all are some of the promises they made. This shared economy promise this was, but today it is exactly opposite. We see all what's going wrong with these platforms basically. So that's the problem, right? So those things can be avoided by approaching the digital economy, shared economy, digital platforms, even like somebody like Amazon. So you can actually have a platform run by all the partners who are selling their products. They can come together and then start their own platform, or they can ask Amazon to make them part of the decision making, part of the participatory approach, where they can participate in both decision making, governing it, managing it. So those kind of things can happen, and the users also. Similarly, Facebook can be done. This can be done in Facebook also. So the people who are using Facebook, right? So different segments of people are there. Every segment can be represented by one person. So that person can, so let's say, in Facebook, there are so many groups, right? So one is national, you can divide by the country based group, like India has 300 million Facebook users. So India as a unit, it can have user representation from India, like, but within that, again, you have to have different sections, right? So one is caste based, religion, gender, and, regional. So rural, urban. So all these kind of segments you can represent in the governance, right? So this is possible, but this, they will tell you the platform, who controls the platform, the market players, they tell you, this is a scarce resource, it is not possible. But that's not true, right? It's a public good. It is possible, because without the user, it cannot run. So users and the developers can come together and then govern this system better, right? And some of the examples, right? So how you apply to the digital economy. There are some who are doing this, right? So one is like commons-based digital infrastructure. So infrastructure also can be shared, right? So it is not that only the data shared, but data is shared through infrastructure, right? So let's say you can have, a cable running through your locality or your city, where you all come together and then, start your own, internet cable company, right? So that's possible. Our satellite company, that's possible. So you bid for our, spectrum in a smaller licensing process, right? So you all come together and then, build this infrastructure. It's possible. And you manage that infrastructure effectively as a commons as governance, commons as a governance system. And databases, right? So you can have open databases which are managed by commons, right? So which are like, let's say, all the health records of particular locality or particular region can be stored in one platform, which is actually owned, managed, and governed by the community, right? So let's say in Mumbai or in Bangalore, a part of the Bangalore come together and then they say, it's like all our residents come together, and then we put our health records in one platform. Let's develop that by putting our resources together and then do it, right? But following the rules, what we have seen, those framework, right? That Eleanor Armstrong's 8 design principles, right? So this is possible. And similarly, collectively developed, deployed, and governed platforms. So that is one part of it, right? So digital infrastructure is infrastructure part. Databases is one database part. But collectively, you can also have, the end-to-end platform. So like Amazon, like, likes of Uber. So where you develop the platform, you deploy that platform into the market, and you govern the platform, manage the platform like their employees do. You also come together as a collective and then do it. So that is possible. Who are, you can actually select people who are skilled in which part of the function. So you can do that. So that's possible. And there are real world examples. These all are, some kind of a use cases, right? So this is possible. The possibilities, those three are possibilities. But beyond possibilities, the real world examples also we have. So one is global internet governance. Internet started as a commons governance by commons, right? So it was not run by anybody. Once US defense developed it, then what they did is they had to forego it because they didn't want to spend so much money on it. They kind of foregone it. Then it was managed by for some time by people who are enthusiasts, technology enthusiasts. They developed the protocols, right? So how what it means actually. So what kind of protocol you need to internet protocols? You would have seen IP address. What is IP address? It's basically internet protocol, right? So what kind of protocol means what? So how do you develop that to basically send your data from one place to another place, right? So these kind of, that governance is actually, and domain names, right? So how do you use the domain names, assign the domain names, numbers? So in the internet space, so this internet governance is basically started as a commons, but today it is actually going into the hands of private enterprises like Google and Apple and all that. So the big tech firms like Microsoft and all that, right? So that is one way of doing it. That's a real world example. And the other real world example, Wikipedia. It's a very classic example, right? So Wikipedia is not a private entity. It is governed. It is actually the money is pulled through public resources, and then this is managed by people who are volunteers, and the sites, the edits, everything, the what you put the content and moderators all coming from the volunteers, right? So the Wikipedia volunteers, where you have in each country, in each location, in each city, you have volunteers come together. They have their wiki meets, and they discuss the challenges. They are in touch with the governance, the board who actually manage this, like so the how we have seen, right, appropriators, and who are accountable also, like the ones who sit in US, but they are actually constantly working with the different volunteers, and it is run as a commons resource, right? So you don't have to pay for it. So it is a free for all, but the resources are pulled through the community, right? So whoever uses it, they pay for them, right? And collective hacking groups, right? So this example is very interesting. So what happened in the heights of COVID pandemic? So Taiwan's government actually initiated a kind of platform to come and work with the government, so that the government can benefit how to respond to the COVID, right? So they have brought a lot of programmers, technology developers, right? So who can actually develop applications for the community, right? So it is sourced from the community itself, in Taipei city. So what they have done is, these hackers basically, they came on the platform, which is like free for everyone, but there are rules which are set, and then there are some technology developers who have taken voluntarily the managing it with along with the partnership with the digital minister of Taiwan. So they all together try to devise a plan by making applications, right? So how to respond to the COVID effectively. So Taiwan became one of the successful stories, how the platforms, these kind of platforms, healthcare platform, public healthcare platforms, right? It's a public health crisis, right? So to how to respond, that the response platform has become more of a commons governed platform, right? So that is one of the finest example for this kind of a approach. So these, this is very much possible in real world. That's what these examples prove that, right? So we have really examples, but the only thing is, people should come together, and then they initiate these and then they initiate these models, and create the purpose, define rules, define clearly objectives, and then put a governance system, and then make everyone participate, make it more participatory, so that it's like everybody's accountable to each other. So then you don't have this problem of commons, a tragedy of commons, right? So then you will also have more empowered digital citizen, right? So you are not just one of the users who basically your data is taken, but in return you get nothing. Unless you pay something, then only you get a product or service. But your data is freely taken, right? So your money is taken, your data is taken. So once you buy it with by transacting with financial transactions, you buy, but your data is freely you are giving, right? So now you don't have to do that in this framework, right? The commons governing framework. Yeah. So this is what I wanted to discuss with you guys. So I hope you have got some sense of what I'm trying to do here, because we are now almost in towards the end of the this lecture. It has been really a great pleasure for me, and it's been an honor to come here and then to interact with you, to discuss with you what I know, and to hear your opinions. And I really thank the Nalanda team and Anup, Swapna, and all the team have done a fantastic job actually. So we will have one session. So then we will talk about the opportunities, right? So what are the opportunities we have in this space, like public policy, digital policy, technology policy, and innovation policy. So all this, what kind of opportunities to study, to pursue further education, or to do research, or to become an analyst, consultant, or to get into corporate world, where you become a advisor to the corporate world, or you are you want to be in the government itself, so you want to participate in the government activity and then become a policy part of the policy making process itself. So all this we can discuss in the next class. So I'm very happy about the way things have smoothly gone here. Yeah. So if you have any questions, let's take the questions, and then we will come to the next session. So what I urge is, I think it will be beneficial for all of you to come to the next session, so that it's like if you have any questions about your career, so how do you want to go about your further studies or jobs in this space, so we can discuss. So I would urge everyone, most of the people, to come here and discuss, or if you have questions, because I would be very happy to answer questions, right? So if you have any questions about anything, either the concepts or your career or your studies, right? So any of these three. So I would be very happy to address any of the issues, right? Any of the questions you have. Yeah. Great, Dara. Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. It's been a really pleasure and privilege also to be here. So really, it's a great opportunity for me to interact with you guys. Yeah. So next class is the last class. So we will discuss more about that, and then I think I will say farewell next next class, right? So, and maybe we will reconvene or restart with another topic, right? So I have something in my mind. So then we will discuss that in the next class if you are interested. Yeah. Google search ranking or a Facebook ad. This is the question, question from Dara. I'm just reading it. So I have written this from earlier notes. So Google search ranking or a Facebook ad urging people to vote in one specific area, not another, in one constituency, can change the voter turnout. This way, it can influence democracy. what can the regulatory mechanisms around platform influencing democracy? Okay. Yeah. So Google search ranking is more complicated. Let's say, because see, in European Union, there are laws, right? So there is a way to audit. I think we spoke this, we discussed about this earlier also in the last, I think very early sessions, maybe second or third sessions. The Google algorithm and the search process, right? Search engine process. One is complex, but if there is an evidence, right, there is a way to deal with it. There is a way to punish them. There is a way to put large penalties, right? Fines, basically. So commercial fines, like, ask them to pay few millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases, right? So this is possible. You can audit the algorithm. If the algorithm is intended, purposely doing, deliberately, they are pushing some results up in the front pages because of the money, but they are not making this ad, right? Because ad is something different. So if it is an ad, they have to tag that content as advertisement content, right? So if it is not advertisement, if it is just general search engine, then if Google is doing the design of algorithm, how they have designed the whole algorithm, that needs to be checked. But some of these algorithms are black box kind of stuff where you cannot find what actually exactly happened. So unless you have the whole trail of the code, and then who designed it, who is responsible for that, and then audit it, so that is a long process, the whole opening up the source code, right? So in some cases they have done it. In European Union, they have asked Google to open the source code, so that they understand where this is coming from and how they have designed the algorithm. So they have done that in certain cases, right? So when they found that Google has flouted the rules on competition, right? Competition laws, or they have antitrust law, they have kind of failed to comply with that. So where they have done that, and where they have demonstrated this anti-competitive behavior, there they have done it, right? So but in this case, if it is ad, then they have to tag ad. Then if there is no regulation that it's like social media cannot have ads on political content, then that's a different issue, right? So if you have regulation, then they cannot have it. Then they have to comply with that. And if they have regulation, then there will be certain kinds of punishment or fines they have to pay, or they may be jail term also if they have that, right? So if the ads are not banned, right? In general, I don't think so ads are banned. So everybody is allowed to place their ads on social media, right? So if it's an ad, then they can freely put an ad, but Google has to tag that ad as an ad, right? Otherwise, then it's a violation. If they are not tagging that as an ad, and then they're passing it off as a search result or just a content in both Facebook and Google, then that's a problem. But if they are not doing that, as long as they are not violating that, then I don't think so there is an issue, right? So per se, that's my take. And second is, so if I am understanding correctly what you are trying to articulate here, so you were saying if Facebook has also urging people to vote, but is that an ad you're talking about, or you are talking about Facebook is doing it through its own content? So I'm not getting that part. If it is an ad, then you can't do anything, right? So ad is an ad, so it is paid, and then you tag it as a advertisement. Yeah. So if you are not clear, or if you think I have not answered this, then you can ask me. Okay. From site Facebook banner to urge vote. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So if the banner is actually put by a party paid to the Facebook, and if it is an ad, if they tag it as an ad, then there is no problem. If they don't tag it, then it's a violation. Probably election commission has to take into consideration and then so how to deal with this, because this is also a violation of the code of conduct, right? The model code of conduct in electoral process. We have model code conduct kicks in, right, within 3 months of notification. Once the notification is out from Election Commission, then obviously the model code conduct is kicked in. So once it kicks in, then you cannot actually violate that. So if they are not placing this an ad, tagging it an ad, and then simply passing it off as a content, which is like Facebook is urging, right? So if then they can complain, anybody, concerned parties can complain to Election Commission or returning officer in that particular, and then they can ask them to take it down. Yeah, thank you. Anything else? Any questions? So in the next session, we will discuss about the papers, the assignments, what you guys have given. I think 2 assignments only I have got till now. So I will do that. I think today I have shared the last session, because I have not uploaded that last previous 2 sessions, the presentation deck. So hopefully that will be up, I think, today or something, because I have just shared it today. I think last night I shared it. So with the team, Nalanda team. So you will be able to access that also, right? So 7 and 8. So I will share this. So 9th session also you will have access to this. And I urge you to read the sources and read the material, so that you are more clear on what you are listening here, right? So because listening will not do everything. So you also need to read and go in depth, right? So when you read in depth, then you will understand, and you're able to tie this, what I am talking about, and then what you guys are. So one clarification, actually, last session, I think I have misspelled one of the political scientists, right? So his name I misspelled, looks like. So the one who actually proposed the idea of developmental state. So his name is actually Shamlan Johnson, right? Yeah. So I have written that in the deck, presentation deck. It's there, so you guys will have it, right? So when you read it, you will have it. And Peter Evans, right? These are the 2 political scientists and development theorists. So they have proposed this developmental state, right? So Peter Evans and Johnson, Professor Chalmers Johnson, right? So these 2 are important figures in developmental state theory, right? But yeah, so let's reconvene next week, Saturday. So our last session. So until then, you guys have a nice weekend and nice week ahead. So I hope you all are safe and be healthy and safe, and then take care of yourself. Okay. Yeah. Bye. Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.